In this episode of AI and Data Governance with Dr. Vega.
Would you go into Boston without a street map or Google on your phone? It'll be just getting from point A to point B would be a nightmare. Alation provides you that map to say, hey, here's how you navigate your data monster, as you said.
Alation coined the term of an enterprise catalog, a modern data catalog, back when it was founded in 2012. I think that there is a myth that data governance has to be this massive, very, very expensive operation where you need, 10 plus people in IT dedicated to data governance.
You don't need to be an IT geek or a data geek like myself to use Alation. It's easy and flexible and intuitive to bring into your organization and get adoption.
I would say if you can Google, you can use Alation. Welcome to the AI and Data Governance Podcast with Dr. Vega, where we explore the cutting-edge AI and data innovations shaping the future of the electric utility industry. I am your host, Rolando Vega, and today we have an exceptionally special guest joining us. I'm really excited about today's conversation. The terminology used in information technology to inventory your assets, it's called cataloging your data and cataloging your digital assets. And the reason I'm excited about today's podcast is because Alation, the company that we're visiting today, coined the term of an enterprise catalog, a modern data catalog, back when it was founded in 2012. And so I'm honored to welcome Mr. Rajat Sinha to the podcast.
Rolando, it's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you for visiting our offices in the Bay Area. Thank you for taking the time for this interview. I think this is going to be an interesting discussion.
Sure, indeed. I'm looking forward to it. And we will discuss the impact of AI and data governance for 5 utility customers that Alation has been supporting. And interestingly, they're of different sizes and different geographies. Let us dive into this conversation. Rajat, what would you say is important to you personally about working in Alation, and why would you say you would call this place home?
Perfect. So thank you again. Look, you mentioned a few points earlier. One was benchmarks, sharing of information, disconnected data world. And what we do here at Alation is we drive data intelligence to a company, to an enterprise. And the 5 organizations you mentioned earlier, that's what we do. We drive data intelligence. Now, data intelligence seems like such a squishy word. Like, what does that mean? Basically, it helps all knowledge workers find, understand, trust, and then finally help govern the data to manage risk, right? So you find data to help either drive revenue, reduce costs, understand it better, so you're not arguing over what net sales means. And that's happened in my life before. Mm-hmm. Trusting it, that's saying, hey, as an analyst, I should be going after these data sources and not the other ones that are because they're deprecated. And then governing it because every person is a steward of data in the company. That's what we do as an organization. And when you look at it collectively, if you have good data intelligence, you have good data culture. These are the seeds of driving shareholder value from data. And look, I've been in data for the past 27 years, and this excites me. This excites me to say that you're utilizing data correctly. That's what attracted me to Alation. It had a growing addressable market. You have more new knowledge workers coming in. It has a fantastic culture here of being collaborative. And then I'm a partnerships person. So I work with people like you to help drive value to the end customer. And I get an opportunity to do that here and build this ecosystem myself. So that's what excites me about Alation, and I'm just, as I said, excited to continue this conversation.
I wanna dive first to the topic of values. Could you share maybe what are some of your personal values?
So yeah, I'm happy to share my personal values, and they relate to the company's values. That's why we're such a big, that's why I'm happy here. My personal values is like having sense of ownership. Like I can take care of it myself. I don't have to outsource some of these things. Sense of urgency. So let's get it done quickly. And speed of implementation. Like, own it. Let's do it quickly. And then let's do it fast. Like,
okay.
So the sense of urgency of actually getting things started, and then how quickly can you get to the finish line. So these things are my personal values. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Let's dive into your career journey. How is your current role building on your journey? If I was to draw a scatter plot, and I have data architect, with these responsibilities, in the following years, tell us about the key milestones and the transitions that are leading you to the point where you are today.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the statement I made earlier, driving stakeholder value through data. That's really what I enjoy doing, okay? And I realized that my first job in Tata Steel back in India, I was programming on CICS and COBOL, so the audience will look at me and I'm dated already, but that still exists, by the way, and it's pretty lucrative if you want to find a job there.
Okay.
But I was building up a program for inventory management on a green screen. And then when I rolled it out, I went to the plant, and this was in 50-degree weather, centigrade weather in India, and you're right next to a hot furnace, hot steel mill, and you've got these steel rolls coming out, and these need to be positioned in an inventory yard. Someone needs to know where it is, and then it has to be put onto a train to be transported to the final destination. This was all done by a clipboard before. Information, talk about data silos, all on a clipboard. And that's where I said, my program that was there was affecting people's lives on the yard that were going out in this heat, looking for those coils and getting them onto a train. Previously, they would walk around for miles in the heat. And now it was like, hey, I know exactly you need to go to B111, signal to the train operator and crane operator that it's here, get it lifted, you're back in the air conditioning in like 5 minutes. So that was one pivotal moment in my life to say, hey, you know what? This is not just green screen stuff, and actually this does affect people's life, and it's data that's doing that. And then I carried that forward through the rest of my career, seeing when I went to IBM, learned consulting skills and frameworks of how to position data to people so that they would respect it. Then I went to work for a retailer, Saks Fifth Avenue, and I understood what does merchandising mean, retail mean, finance operations mean, and I learned a lot there. But it was all with this whole North Star of saying, you know what? People are actually making decisions and driving their livelihood out of data. So why not make data right? Why not help people find, understand, trust the data so that they can make it easier to go do their jobs?
So let's dive into the utility world and how some of these utilities have sought out the help from Alation to create value in their organizations. And so take a moment to kind of walk me through some of the big success stories and case studies of these utilities. Let's start with whichever of the utilities you want to start with.
Let's start with Avista Energy. They're like a good referenceable customers of ours because we provided a lot of value to them. And as listening to them speak, and the value that Alation has provided is helping knowledge workers find, understand, trust, and govern their data, building this culture of data intelligence. So how do we do that at Avista Energy? And when you look at it, look at it from three different lenses. One is a focus on the customer. The second would be a focus on business support, right? And a third would be a focus on the grid itself. So when you say business support, it's like field operations.
Gotcha.
Avista Energy does a fantastic job on disaggregating data for the end consumer. So the end consumer is using multiple appliances. How are these different appliances functioning? Are there utility vampires within the household? When is it time to change the AC? Can you help me with the decision-making process? That provides value to the end customer to become a loyal Avista customer, right? So they're a low switching cost to go to any other energy company. So that's one. The other part of it is
before we go on, let me ask you a question about this, because help me understand how is Alation really helping, because someone that would build the disaggregation model may not be familiar about the value that Alation is bringing into this topic.
Fantastic question. So let me add to that. If you look at the profile of a data scientist usually spend about 80% of their time wrangling data, finding, understanding, and trusting data. And they have to code, they have to know Python. Why don't we just reduce the learning factor from that and put in a single platform like Alation to help you find, understand, and trust the data, to see what data is being used, where should I pull that data from to feed into these models. If you can reduce that 80% time, you give more time back to the data scientist and advanced analytics person to do what they really love, like building out statistical models, building out, doing the regression analysis on the data. So it shifts the focus from, hey, doing a lot of the grunt work around data, which is sometimes non-value adding, to doing like the really good stuff that you've hired them for. And it helps drive employee morale and employee satisfaction. So think about it from a company perspective also. You want that data scientist that you've hired for who knows how much, $100,000 to stick with the company because now they're knowledgeable about the data. If you continue to give them data wrangling work and they don't feel like in a way that it's too difficult to just get the data across different silos, they will leave.
Oh, I don't think any utility has this problem.
I'm sure they do.
Now, this is interesting, because if you make the 80% of the time that they are typically consuming in just finding and preparing information, a much smaller amount of time, closer to, zero, let's say, because it's at their fingertips to find the reliable data. You're saying that you are in the business in a way, and there are other reasons, but you're in the business of making these analysts at least 5 times more productive. I'm just doing the counter argument here, 80% gone, that is 4 to 5 times, more productive. Right. Anything else you would add on that?
I think, so employee retention is key. Like, think about situations where an employee has taken, an analyst or even an advanced analytics person has taken 4 months to develop a deliverable, only to go back to find that the data sets they were looking at were incorrect, were deprecated, shouldn't have been looking at it. Something is wrong about it. Alation allows you to figure out which is the trusted data to go after and where to use it, and then communicate within the platform with different data stewards to say, hey, am I looking at the right stuff? Am I looking at the right data? Am I looking at revenue and gross margins the right way? And it helps drive that value chain process around data so much quicker and so much efficiently to give you the results. Yeah,
I'm with you. I'm thinking, of those executives perhaps that, and there is a lot of very well-informed, people in all spectrums of the organization. But some people may think that, once we have data, we say, okay, we have customer data here, table identified. This is going to be my good customer data. And now I have my assets, and how we keep the information about the assets in this other table. Why do I need to keep bothering about, tracking this information if I already tell you this is the customer data and this is the asset data? Done. You don't need more intelligence. But I think that, this is an incomplete picture. Can you tell us more? Why is this an incomplete picture?
I'm smiling because when we look at that, that's a perfect world. Like, data is constant. Like, it's static. It never moves.
Right.
Like, the company never moves, never acquires companies, right? So I don't have another data asset base to deal with. The company now never divests of data and companies. So there are so many moving parts. And then and within those moving parts, can I still have people within the company crowdsource what is correct? and put a stamp of approval so that across the company people know, okay, these are some things that are valuable assets for us to use, and here are valuable assets that need to be deprecated and moved out.
Mm.
So think about from a macro perspective. I think of an organization like a living, breathing organism. And there's nothing static within an organism. So why would they be something static and rigid within data and your data assets? So that continues to move. So you have to have a platform like Alation or a catalog that tells you where the moving parts are. Where are people looking for where the interesting data is? What are the patterns of what they're looking at? How are they figuring out, and why are they looking at this data constantly? There's something there. Can I build something else that is innovative based on this data?
Yeah.
And provide it as something that my consumer can use as a product.
I'm with you. I think that another misconstrued idea is that, once you have your source data, unaltered source information, let's call it the raw data,
Right.
that, we say that, the data is constantly moving, and I could see how people understand that data is changing over time, not a problem. But the challenge is that the first time you duplicate this information, which happens, and it's part of the process of growing in intelligence, you may enrich this information. You're joining it with other information. And now, down the road, other folks will use the copy of the data to make another set of the data. And the challenge is that, most of the time organizations haven't had the governance to even define the order in which you're, and the policies that you use to duplicate information. Not always duplication is justified, but the truth is that it has been happening for a long time. And so this is now, it's a monster that is waiting to be tamed because data is chaotic and has been chaotic for a long time. And so, yes, you can bring some order with data governance, but you still have a monster to deal with. And so this is where it also provides tremendous value.
So think of Alation like a map. Would you go into Boston without a street map or Google on your phone? It'll be just getting from point A to point B would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Alation provides you that map to say, hey, here's how you navigate your data monster, as you said.
Yeah.
And hopefully it doesn't turn out to be a monster. It turns out to be a handsome prince. So you gave us the example on the customer side for Avista, the disaggregation of data, and then we went into the discussion of the value, for the analyst, and how you increase the value of your analysts, the information workers within the workforce, and how it helps on employee morale, to retain your own workforce, attract talent, retain talent. It's helping you on all of that. Let's come back to Avista. And tell us more about how this provided value to them. Yeah, so the other thing is with Avista, you have customers calling in about troubleshooting some issues. The turnaround time to get those troubleshooting tickets resolved, because now a customer service representative can communicate with their manager more quickly and reduce that turnaround time to get back to the customer. So your customer satisfaction index now goes high.
Okay.
Right? So that's another use case that they're looking at. When you look at the grid itself, in today's environment, there are more EV, electric vehicles, that are getting more and more electricity out of the grid. How is it being utilized? How do I provide for that? How do I do the analysis around that? That's another use case that Avista looks at and says, where do I need to make the infrastructures around the grid to support this? Now that's an output coming in out of the grid to support the EV ecosystem. What about inputs coming in through the solar panels? How do you manage that? How do you manage coming back the data flow and the electricity flow to say, okay, there's a chargeback thing that is happening out here. And how do I understand it on an individual basis? And what does that mean for my grid overall in terms of network operations, in terms of maintenance? What does that mean? Avista takes a stance of powering all that information gathering and information intelligence through Alation. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the second part of it. I'll pause for any questions you might have.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the conversation we were having about you have unaltered data. You need to sometimes make some transformations. You have sometimes some of the most let's say more junior analysts that they see 5, 10 tables they need to combine, and they will combine it to create, this flat table that they can now push into your Power BI dashboard, etc. And so with let's say a little bit less experience, there is a tendency where all you want to do is aggregate everything in a single table. But when you're talking about the grid and solar panels and maintenance, there are, the dimensionality problem that we're dealing with. It's a massive, one. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that there is still a myth that you can essentially turn all of your data into a massive single file for all of your customer, and therefore that's a customer 360 view.
Yeah. So first of all, denormalization is a curse that I've dealt with in my career, and I have been at fault of putting that in because it seems to be the easiest way of providing some kind of analytics. With a platform like ours, if you can connect to different sources, you do not need to denormalize, correct?
Yep.
And if you can have a single source of truth with a catalog, you do not need to denormalize. What you do is based on what you find, the understanding of the data around it, you can query if you want to use query, or you can use natural language to provide the output that is needed. And you can provide it to a person that is not even equipped to use SQL queries.
How come? Tell me more.
It's like a Google-like interface. Think about Google. How do you need to be educated to use Google? It's very intuitive, and that's exactly what happens. It's very intuitive driven to use the platform. So go from point A to point B. There'll be question, answer. There'll be other people to help you out. So you know exactly how to traverse the data landscape.
Now that you mentioned...
You'll be able to see exactly, I want to go back and say, hey, this data in this kind of segment looks odd, you can traverse back through a lineage to say, where is this coming from? And where are the bottlenecks around this data value chain?
You mentioned natural language, which is the way that people communicate, and is typically how we would write a query in Google, using, let's say, a sentence or a question.
Right.
And let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think that this market is changing rapidly, even how we Google things, especially with generative AI. And I know you guys have been doing some significant investments in advancing the way that we looked at, a data catalog and how you search information. Could you maybe take a moment? And I know I'm going in maybe a different direction than we originally planned, but I think that a lot of our audience will be listening and say, they listen the word Google. Well, I don't go to Google anymore. I do all of my queries in ChatGPT now.
Correct.
So where is Alation? What is Alation's posture on the topic, and how do you think that we're going to advance in this space?
Yeah, so I'll take a step back. I think the question is more around the AI impact on what is happening to companies like us. So first, it's a recognition that the AI economic impact, based on Gartner studies, is like 2.4 to about $4.1 trillion. And that is huge. We can see it, how we're utilizing data today. Now let's take a step back. So we looked at the model, we talked about that. But if you don't have trusted data, how do you have trusted AI? That's our premise. Okay. And AI model documentation, looking at what is sensitive data, look at how do you look at labeled data sets you should be using and not being used to be fed into the model is super important. So that's one of our value propositions around AI. The next is, if you've got good data quality that is trusted, you reduce hallucinations. The third is looking at AI traceability, model traceability, and creating a straight lineage between data and the models, and how that figures into your value proposition around AI. And the final piece of it is around collaborating around models and data. How do you get people? We've been talking about collaboration, which is key to success in driving data literacy and data culture. That collaboration can be done through Alation. So that's our point of view. Like from a platform perspective, yes, we have automatic curation and everything else that is AI driven. Our behavior engine that is there, that is the core of our product, is already AI driven. So yes, we continue to do that. But these are the 4 or 5 parts where we're looking at AI to help further our value proposition for our customers.
Phenomenal. And I have heard, from, let's say, the data practitioners that one of the most difficult things about their data governance program is how do you tag information? How do you describe the data assets, the dashboards, the information you have, because there is so much. And so you're touching on let's say the popularity of the data and how you rank what data is more pertinent for a particular query. Could you comment a little bit more about, what does it mean to have automatic, description for your data? Because, that's such a powerful thing, but I think sometimes, we don't talk enough about that. That is a lot of man hours that typically would be put into that.
It is a lot of man hours. So you're right. Imagine being able to have crawlers going out into your data and figuring out, okay, this is a customer data itself. So let me just tag this as customer rather than someone actually have to going in there and inspecting that and then making those tags. So that's what we do right now. It's automatic, intelligent curation,
Yep.
and then defining more in terms of a search perspective, like what should you be looking at? Intelligent search, what next you should be looking at.
Yep.
That's in our roadmap coming up in our AI platform that we're rolling out.
Outstanding. Okay, so you're still talking about Avista.
Uh-huh.
You address the customer value add. You have
We talked about the grid.
Be talking about the grid. I think you mentioned earlier on business support, also known as field ops, by most utilities. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I think the field operations people in the utilities company have a really tough job.
Oh yeah.
Seriously, really tough job. They're out, and what's the kind of support that you can provide to them? Can you give them their equipment on time, that it's working?
Yeah.
Right? Can you give them the inventory that is needed? So the whole inventory supply chain is managed by data, which needs to be collaborated across the organization, across different people to say, hey, this individual that is now going to go to this place is supported. And what are the problems that person is facing and how do we better rectify that? If you keep that in silos of data, that silo of data is not helping field operations as a mass. But if I can actually put a catalog behind that and know the trends that are happening across the utility company, then I can solve it in one go. Yeah. So it's inventory management, field operations, better visibility, problem statements, and then providing support from that Avista Energy did a fantastic job on.
Nice. And I think there is a new terminology for this field that we will hear more and more. Is known as flexible materials management. Has traditionally been known as asset management in a more traditional sense, but within utilities they're calling it flexible materials management, and is really pinning down on how do you deal with inventory management for emergency readiness. And actually emergency operations, because that you need to know where your assets are when you need to know that information. It's not when the data was scanned days ago. No, in the moment of an emergency, I need to know right now where my inventories are and how many left do I really have.
Correct.
If I go to my grocery store, or I go to Costco, I say I'm looking for this particular thing, and they will pull the app and they will tell me I have 2 left in stock, right? That is the experience that utilities are aiming, to have in a much more dynamic way than ever before, because from the traditional perspective, asset management and flexible materials management is accounted for from a planning perspective.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
You have a little more time for planning, right? I have 20 transformers in stock. I am utilizing about 2 or 3 a week, and you make a projection, and I have so many weeks worth of inventory from a transformer perspective. So that's one thing, and that's okay. We can address that. But the resurgence in this need is the dynamic nature of this equipment. On an hourly basis, on a daily basis, which is typically not the field of planning, right? So I'm glad that you're mentioning that from a field operations perspective.
It has to be a healthy balance between the flexibility that you mentioned. And previously, I used to work with all these consumer good companies. They would spend inordinate amount of time in planning, but they were also a just-in-time inventory solution to meet needs of the customer. So
Yep.
how do I reroute whatever is needed from maybe not the source, but some other place that is in between
Yep.
to get to the end customer?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that every one of the warehouses, has sometimes its own data system to collect information, sometimes even spreadsheets that they're keeping track on. And at the end of the day, as an enterprise, when you're looking at these things as an enterprise, it's not just optimizing things within the warehouse, but is that warehouses need to help each other and you need to move inventories around.
So think about the change management problem around data that is created with these data silos, right? If you're the CDO for that organization, how do you manage change? How do you manage risk? How do I know what are my inventory turns? You have no clue if it's siloed data in a warehouse. But once you have a catalog, you have an option to go out there and say, bring it to a safe place where we can give you the flexibility of using the data. So I'm not doing this to the data. I'm actually saying, hey, give it to us, and we will make it better for you to use and for everyone to use. We are going to make you the data heroes of the company. That's such a better approach than just saying, hey, give me your data and I'm going to enclose it.
Yeah.
And then you have to come back and pay a fee to me to use it, which is traditionally what has happened. A
Right.
catalog kind of overcomes that barrier, unlocks those chains.
I'm glad that you mentioned change management, because we can come to the manager in that warehouse and say, give it to me so that we can, provide a better, more integrated view of the information. And of course we have this feeling of, I need to protect my information because it's my process, I'm the one responsible for this data. So the moment that other people start touching it, should I now be responsible for keeping this information, up to date? And I lose some control in the process. And so I think that there is a tendency to just say, oh, if we give it to them, whomever them is, the system integrators, that will bring the data catalog, now it's an IT problem.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about, and there is a process to uplift people. And we already talked about this. When we're bringing a cataloging, an intelligence data platform for the organization that breaks these silos, it's not that we are breaking silos so that now we have all of the data centralized and just the few elect people can really work with the information. It's not that. What is it then? So, yeah.
Yeah. So again, data democratization is key, right? How do you get data in a centralized place under one umbrella, under a potential catalog, right? But then give ease of access and ease of use to people. That's the key to make people knowledge workers to appreciate it and create stickiness within your data ecosystem.
Yeah.
And look, we can talk about some of the other thoughts that we have and pillars around building out data culture. And it's around data leadership, data search and discovery that we've talked about, data governance and data literacy, but we're happy to go into that.
Oh, we'll definitely come back to this topic.
I do have one more topic that I want to cover. And like Avista, as I did my research and on the company and the value we are providing is again around customer empathy. Like in today, if you go to the city of San Francisco, there's a huge homeless population. Downtown San Francisco.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to that. Avista is actually looking at different populations in different parts of the state to say where is there a potential issue of a person going homeless because of the electricity bills that are there. They're managing third-party data, they're blending it all together, and then they're putting you into programs ahead of time to say, hey, we are going to take care of you, Mr. Customer, right?
Yeah.
So it's, as I said, these companies try and drive stakeholder value and not just shareholder value, which is, I guess, is important for utility companies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so when you look at this use case, if you do not democratize data to get information from third parties, have different analysts look at it, and look at the consumer to say, how do I actually help this consumer? What are we doing here? Like, how are we serving the consumer? And then it's all value extraction, no value payback. So that really resonated with me with what Avista is doing. So we covered like 3 different areas of problems that Avista is solving.
That resonates with me also, because one of the key motivations for me to launch the AI and data governance podcast with Dr. Vega is because we want all utilities of all sizes to be able to tap onto the lessons learned from those bigger utilities that have had the blessing of being able to invest in these more advanced ways of working. And so this podcast exists precisely because this is exactly the sort of ideas we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to use the latest resources that don't burden people. Actually, it makes them free to make decisions.
And you don't need to be an IT geek or a data geek like myself to use Alation. It's easy and flexible and intuitive to bring into your organization and get adoption.
But I would say if you can Google, you can use Alation.
I would say that.
Okay, let's continue on this journey. Avista, we covered Avista.
Yes.
And because of time management, we may have to select some key highlights from the other utilities here. So you want to go next to the generation and transmission co-op?
Yeah, I
perhaps?
think this is like in the absolutely different side of the spectrum. This generation transmission cooperative has about, let me look at the data here really quickly, about 450 employees, 70,000 consumers across 18 member co-ops. So a really small team, but 18 member co-ops are kind of saying, hey, support me, you're a supporting function, and how do you work around this? And so the problem lies is like the centralization of information and shared services, but how do you operate more efficiently around data and the data value chain? Rather than each co-op providing their information and you dealing one-to-one with that co-op, can we get all the data together, remove the silos, provide a platform for everyone to benchmark? You mentioned benchmark, how they're doing in terms of productivity, and then sharing that information back and forth as needed. So this generation and transmission cooperative, small as they are, is utilizing Alation just for that. They're looking at not only that, but they're looking at driving continuous improvement based on the data that they're getting to drive more products for the end users. Looking at, hey, what is a better ROI that I can provide to these co-ops? And what are cost savings that I can provide by making sure that the data is efficiently used? So it's a wholesaler that they're working as, and they're looking at ways to scale the organization as small as they are, but efficiently using the data. Yeah, and they take a very persona-based approach, like analysts, like how do I find which source is classified? How do I look at different data sets that I need to use? Which are the different fields that are popular out there? I would like to see how this data travels across the data ecosystem, across the different co-ops. And is there any trends that I can see out there? The IT person doesn't have to be called to say that. The end user can actually do that. People in the co-op can do that. So Alation provides that facility to people as small as an organization as this generation transmission company to enable people with their data.
Okay. So let us dive, maybe we can touch a little bit on Vattenfall and Endeavor.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Vattenfall, again, let me look at the data. It's one of our top customers, again, referenceable. You can find videos on our website. About 40,000 employees, 7 million customers, based out of Europe, been with us for many years, and a happy customer, I'm happy to report. And so there were three things that attracted Vattenfall to us. Okay, utilities in themselves are not mandated to have something called data literacy. Right? There's no one out there saying that you have to do this, that you have to have data lineage. It has to generate this value through new service offerings. However, what happens in utility companies, you do have silos. And it behooves you to remove those data silos and to make it easier for the end consumer to use. So that was one reason that they looked at us. The other one was like, because of the ease of use, compliance became easier. Okay, it was easier to track where the data reside, who's using it, how it's being used, and it was easy to put in policies in place to govern the data. And finally, like the whole point of once you eliminate data silos, it was easy to drive collaboration, like between business users and IT and quasi-IT. It was so much easier to do all of that. And then it created a unified data platform where people actually love using it across the organization. So I've come up with people saying, hey, you know what? A stranger the other day was sitting across from me from dinner, and they were, I said I worked at Alation. He said, I'm an Alation user. I love it. So that's the kind of response that we get.
Nice.
And that's the response that we get from Vattenfall as well when we speak to them. Yeah.
Outstanding. So ease of use. You guys are driving these forward, championing the way on ease of use from a data cataloging perspective.
Ease of use, compliance easier, eliminating data silos, boosting collaboration. Yeah.
Outstanding. Okay. Let's dive into one of the next categories here on the topic of partnerships in data governance. You have called data governance a team sport, and I love that analogy. How do you bring together all the players, the data stewards, the business analysts, your executive team to be on board, the compliance auditors, to make sure everyone is collaborating effectively? What has worked for you in getting everyone on the same page to boost data management practices? I do recall you mentioning, I'm tempted to call it the Rajat wheel, but it's really the alliances flywheel. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, and I think we discussed this earlier prior to this interview in prep. The way I look at it in today's data pervasive world, there are a few players that are out there that people cannot ignore. One of the cloud service providers. It's inevitable that the utilities companies are going to move to the cloud. So that's one stakeholder that you have to manage. The other stakeholder is technology and platform providers like us that provide value on top of the cloud services providers. And the third is system integrators like yourself, analytics automation, that stitch everything together to make sure that this is working and have domain experience to say, I'm actually hitting the customer problem and solving for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then how do you put this all together? It has to be through an efficient platform that is super focused on customer value. And we just talked about those customer use cases. And so where I think everyone comes together, you talk about the positive business outcome first, what needs to be done, what's the current state, what's the future state, and how do we solve for it? Like, what's the gap? And that's all these three entities in the flywheel take a very pragmatic approach to solving that problem. Okay? So that's the way I think about the flywheel. And if you get that flywheel going, the more shareholder value and stakeholder value you're creating for the end consumer, because that's the focus.
Now, let's dive into innovations and future trends. Many mischaracterize how data needs to be perfect for AI to work. What does it really mean to produce data that is AI ready? We're kind of now looking forward. How do we define this future projection? Because I get the sense that people say data quality. We all know bad data quality is not good. We know that principle, but essentially we all are aiming to have perfect data, and that's not where we want to be. Well, in a way, we want to be in perfect data, but it's actually quite unlikely.
Yeah, so I think we touched upon the AI topic in conversations earlier. I think I'll lead with this thought is like being context-aware data, right, will help drive some of these AI models to not hallucinate. So it's not about data quality around the vectors of data quality. The question is, so what? You want it to be data that is natural. There should be some dirty data. It's like real world that you're trying to show. So how do you know that it's relevant and context aware to put into a model? And that's what we can do for you as a platform to say, hey, with this kind of microscope that we look at data and get the collaboration around the platform for people to come back and say, this is the context that is around the data. Mm-hmm. This is the trustworthy piece of the data. This is what is ready to go into the model for you to be successful. That's what we can do and help. And that's what we're doing as part of our strategy as well, trying and promote that to make sure that there is a safe AI environment for everyone in the universe. Yeah?
Perfect. And this is connected to something, you have a phenomenal resource I found in the data culture maturity assessment. We're kind of coming towards the end of
Yes.
our podcast here today. Can you tell us what is it? What are the key components, and how can people use it?
Absolutely. So data culture maturity assessment. So we took a step back and said, okay, like we talk about data intelligence, we talk about data culture. Can we put some capabilities around that? And that's where the whole concept of the data culture maturity assessment came in. And like I know Dama has another maturity assessment, you can find that. But this is quick and easy. Like it's again non-invasive for your business users, IT, quasi-IT, everyone to take and give you a current state analysis of like, hey, where are we in terms of, if I want to search and discover my data, where are we in terms of that? Do I rank myself foundational? Am I a beginner? Am I advanced? Where do we think we are? And is there a collective intelligence that tells us across our boundary of the organization, where do we think we are? So that's one. Then around data governance, applying policies and rules, where do we think we are? Okay. Data literacy. How are we in the organization? What are the gaps in that? How do I get knowledge workers in different parts of the organization, not just IT, to become literate? And what does data literacy mean for us? Right? And then how do we act on that? And then finally, leadership. Look, as you said, this is about people. And change management is huge. So do I have a sponsor that is going to take us forward? Do I have a point of view that is going to help us with business outcomes? And do I have data to provide some kind of value behind that, right? That is quantifiable and not just qualitative.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, so I'll give you an example. So we ran something similar for one of our customers. And like we have quantifiable data to say like, with the investment they made, their returns were about $4.9 million over a period of 1 year in saving about 51,000 hours in just searching for data. 51,000
Wow.
hours. About 100,000 hours in just removing the issues around comprehension of data. That's about another huge amount in terms of 2 to 3 million. And then looking at, you got queries that can be reused. Can I remove having to reuse some of the queries and give you something standard? Or like, what is the whole impetus of query writing? And how much time does it take when you have a natural language processing platform? And that gave us another figure. So the cumulative sum was that, and this came from the customer itself, was about $4.9 million. So if you look at different companies, it definitely, and a system integrator like yourself can be very qualitative by helping companies saying, let's take this assessment, let's create a value index, and then let's come back and see whether we're meeting these needs or not.
Yeah.
And then where do we fall on this? I think that's the way forward for us to work together. Yeah, I think that is like you're focused 100% on the value that you're creating and the positive business outcomes you're driving for the energy and utilities company.
Where can people get a hold of these assessment?
It's on our website. So if you go to our website and look for data culture maturity assessment, you can find it there.
Outstanding. So I think that some of our utilities and utility leaders listening to us might be wondering, is this whole topic of, a data catalog and Alation, only for the big, utilities? And, we already demonstrated, we have even a co-op that has been taking advantage of these. But I do believe that, there will be an increasing trend on more and more of all sizes of utilities tapping onto a data catalog. I think that there is a myth that data governance has to be this massive, very, very expensive operation where you need, 10 plus people in IT dedicated to data governance, and some of these co-ops, are 1, 2, 3, 4 people in IT, and that's the whole IT operation.
Correct.
And they would be seriously concerned in, let's say, another layer of bureaucracy. No, and we're not talking about that. I think that actually good data governance and good AI governance practices can be implemented in a very cost-effective way. And so I wanted to extend an invitation to all of our audience to reach out to me or Rajat. I'll put both of our LinkedIn profiles in the description. And I hope that our conversation today was helpful to you guys. Please feel free to add your comments below as you are thinking of ideas of what you would want us to cover in the future. We'll be delighted to keep identifying amazing people like Rajat in the industry and keep finding that, those golden nuggets in the industry to bring back the value back into utilities across the country. With that, thank you so much, guys. Rajat, thank you so much for your time with us today. Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Bye.